Hello, welcome to John's Jams podcast with your host, me, John, and today Mike has returned to our graces at long, long last.
Hello, yeah, I'm looking forward to getting my teeth into this KoRn discography review at last because there's a lot to dig into. Very long discography, storied career with many peaks and troughs, as I'm sure we'll get into shortly.
For anyone who didn't catch the last episode we released a while back, me and Mike were at one point in our lives super KoRn fans.
Yeah, huge
We
fans.
absolutely loved the band, worshipped the band, and like new metal in general.
I am the self-appointed number one former nu metal fan in the world.
Yeah, that's it. I think the biggest difference between me and yourself is I think it's kind of funny, really, because like when you think about music and you think of music you quote unquote grow out of,
Yeah,
it's interesting in it because when you're younger, you have a different kind of taste palette to when you're older.
definitely, yeah.
But it's like if I got into a band now, I don't think in 10 years' time I'd like not be into that band.
Exactly, yeah. And to be honest, it's been a long time since I'd listened to KoRn's music before I decided to do the full discography listen through in
Yeah,
preparation for this podcast. So I had a lot of nostalgia bias lurking somewhere in the back of my mind, and I wanted to just get rid of that, listen to it with a fresh set of ears, so no bias can affect it. I listen to it objectively, with my current. I've grown out of the nu metal phase.
yeah.
Obviously, KoRn were my favourite band at one point, so I was really interested to revisit as an adult, a fresh set of ears on it and just see what I think.
We'll get all into it all as each album goes on, but I think the main thing with yourself was there was a point where you completely tapped out
Yeah,
and you were like, "I'm done. I'm not
but
listening to any
yeah,
anymore.
definitely. Yeah.
I'm done with this band." And you washed your hands with them. I kind of went through a similar process. It kind of got to a point where it was like, this music's not for me. I think this band's kind of took a turn in the wrong direction,
Yeah,
but I kind of felt like a sense of loyalty to them,
yeah.
like a sense of like, well, they've been there for me, so I'll be there for them
Yeah, I
kind of
get that.
kind of mentality.
I get that totally. And a lot of Korn's fan base is still people around about our age or maybe a little bit older. They've got a very, very loyal fan base who have stuck with them throughout all the bad times, and they've come out the other end of it. I won't spoil anything for the review, but like you said, I think the Korn fans that are still there, still been hanging on strong. I think they're getting the rewards currently.
Aye, well, we're not going to spend any more time messing about because
Yeah.
we've got a lot to get through.
Oh, we have certainly.
So let's travel back 30 years to 1994. Korn's debut album, their self-titled debut album, produced by Ross
Ross Robinson, it
Ross
was.
Robinson,
That's right.
who's a bit of a new metal pioneer.
Yeah, he's a legend, isn't
Did
he?
a lot of production on
Prominent new metal
prominent new
voices.
metal artists. Yeah, self-titled.
Self-titled Korn album. Well, first of all, they didn't mess about, did they? They broke onto the scene with an incredibly unique sound. The fusions of metal with hip hop and funk had already been done before. Bands like Rage Against the Machine, Faith No More had been around, doing the thing. There'd been the rap rock fusions of the 80s, but Korn broke onto the scene with an incredibly darker, grimier sound that was completely their own, completely unique to them. It was dark, it was raw, it was loose. It had that hip hop groove to it. And John Davis was one of the most distinguishable frontmen in the genre. He's got an unmistakable voice, hasn't he? You know that it's him when you listen
Oh
to
yeah,
a
you
Korn song.
certainly do. I think the interesting thing I think of when I kind of think of Korn and new metal and alternative metal is how they kind of like broke all the rules of
Yeah,
metal
yeah, yeah.
and kind of what metal was kind of what was kind of expected of metal
He wore
around
tracksuits.
that time. Yeah, yeah, like the style, the look, and everything like that. But more the fact of like metal before that, everything was tight. It was solos. It was
Yeah,
it was tight, concise songwriting,
definitely.
storytelling. Korn kind of throw that all out the window.
Yeah,
A lot of the songs, especially on this first album, feel like very personal
definitely.
and
Yeah.
very like emotionally charged.
It wasn't really known for metal bands to write such vulnerable songs and vulnerable lyrics, was it? It
No,
was
it
all sort
certainly
of
wasn't.
it was a very macho genre, especially
Yeah,
coming off thrash metal and death metal of the 80s and stuff like that. Korn really did rip the rule book up with regards to that. The vulnerability of the lyrics, which we'll get into in a minute, was a massive selling point of the band. So just to start off, the album kicks off with one of Korn's best songs ever, one of the most well-known songs ever, Blind. It's just a banger, isn't it? It starts off with the ominous little hi hat
If I've got to be honest with you, it's never really been my favourite
Wow,
Korn song that
wow.
on that. But let's just
You ready?
let's take a very slight pivot. And a lot of Iron Maiden fans don't like the song Iron Maiden.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I'm
I
not a fan of it.
love the song Iron Maiden. I
Yeah,
think for the same reason that Korn fans love Blind is that it is the starting point.
yeah, it is.
It's
Yeah,
page one, isn't it? It is the start. It's the song that's just going to absolutely go fucking nuts
live.
live. The
Yeah, yeah.
live performance. It has got that perfect kind of build up, but
Been the opening track to the opening album. It's
yeah,
iconic in that way, isn't it?
yeah.
Um,
It really is. It is a great track, but it's never been one that I've been like, I never go into it much. So
fair enough. Yeah, yeah. The pace of the album doesn't take a nosedive after Blind. Ball Tongue and Need To are both bangers, in my opinion. There is a bit of a lull in the track list when Clown comes in, though. Clown, Divine, and Faggot. Can I say that on here? Not aged really well, as it feels. Faggot feels a bit like a poor man's Blind to me. It doesn't hit the same.
going back to when we were younger, and back to that emotion and that emotionally charged music. The songs like that just hit the right spot for me.
Yeah,
I think yeah, obviously it is a bit of a troubled title, but I think where it was coming from, obviously because that was a label that was
yeah, yeah,
given to John Davis quite a lot, especially during kind of like the late 80s.
yeah,
Going to school, growing up, being part of the new wave kind of
yeah, yeah.
genre, fashion and style.
In this period of the album as well, tracks 4 to 6, the lyrics tend to be about his high school experiences. Clown's the same, isn't it? It's about basically a high school bully picking on him.
Yeah, see, this is where it's kind of like this. This is where you made their name in this field, and I think later on it kind of goes against them a bit. Obviously, we're jumping a bit ahead there, but in this kind of time period on this album, it really does work because these the band themselves are just kind of
Yeah,
fresh into like adulthood, fresh into like this world of which is
stardom.
in a way is quite hopeless. It's you sink or swim, don't you? Just especially them being from kind of like Bakersfield
Yeah,
and the struggles that they went through. Like and this album really kind of captures the desperation, I would say,
yeah.
of the band and the hunger and the drive and everything was there and
Mm. It
they were
also
really punching to do something with this album. It wasn't just a
no,
let's go in and make some noise. There was a clear mission
yeah.
and plan.
It was the first time they'd been able to express themselves like this to a large audience as well. They'd hit a level of stardom pretty much straight away, didn't they? Just to talk a bit about the sound of this album a bit more. Feel these bass tone, crunchy slap style, down tuned to A on a 5 string. Who was doing that in 1994? It was unheard of, wasn't it? It was so like, wow, what is this?
Yeah,
Monkey's guitar was heavily influenced by bands like Mr. Bungle with the chords high up on the neck, very eerie little melodies during the verses. It just all came together perfectly for me.
yeah. It's like I said, going back, isn't it? They had the rule book and they kind of tossed it out the
Yeah,
window, and they
yeah.
were like, "Fuck that." Have your guitars, nice standard tune.
We don't need solos.
No, let's make it sloppy. Let's make it,
Yeah,
like as you say, the bass. It sounds crunchy.
yeah,
It,
yeah.
it, it sounds like
And the same thing was going on in rock music in general with the grunge movement, wasn't it? This new
Oh
metal,
yeah,
the,
yeah,
the birth of new metal ran parallel with like
yeah,
the grunge movement of the early 90s. So it was the same thing. It was like, let's take this pristine, clean sound, rip it up and start again, and we're starting at basement level basically. It sounds of its time, but my God, it does still sound as fresh as it did when I very first heard it. Shoots and ladders. We've got to talk about shoots and
no,
ladders a little bit, haven't we? We discussed this on
yeah.
the
We had a fun story about shooting ladders,
on
didn't
the
we?
last podcast. If you want to go back and listen to that, we did have a fun story, but it's the nursery rhyme lyrics. They sort of come out of nowhere, don't they? But apart from that, the groove and the chorus is it's nice. I like this song. Murray had a little lamb bit. Goes quite hard actually when you re-listen to it. He's just screaming his brains out. John Davis. He sounds completely demented in the best way possible. And his vocals on the song "Lies" are another highlight for me because he does this death metal growl which pretty much goes on for the length of the chorus,
Yeah,
and it's
yeah,
like
it's great that.
it's like backing vocals. He's doing the backing vocals while he's also singing over the top of it. And this death metal growl, it just seems to go on forever. I'm like, wow, like who knew that John Davis had that in him? But it's legit. Like it's guttural to be fair to him.
To say it was the hunger, wasn't it? It was just the drive
Yeah,
and the passion. And I think one thing that I kind of like about this album is sometimes people use the term first take or first draft
yeah,
as an insult. They go, "Oh, them lyrics seem first draft," or "that seems first take."
yeah,
I think I don't know the full in and outs of the making of the album, but it feels in a way first take, but in a
yeah.
positive way,
It feels
whereas
it feels live to me.
things are being tried off the cusp
Yeah, yeah,
and things are being done off the like on Shoots and Ladders. I think one part I quite like is which to some bands would probably be seen as an outtake, and they probably do it again. Kind of like the unaudible lyrics
yeah,
when he's
yeah.
doing the Mary had a little lamb
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that.
It's like
It's
he's
like,
half
Mary had a
scat.
little lamb.
Yeah, yeah. It's like he's half scatting, isn't it? But it's like
Yeah,
you don't know what he's saying, but it just sounds nasty, doesn't it? And
yeah,
it is a really interesting track.
yeah.
I don't think we can not discuss the song "Daddy," can we? We've got to touch on it. It's a very disturbing, personal track. Do you want to just give a bit of a overview as to what the lyrics are actually about?
Yeah, so I think to be honest, they're deliberately a bit ambiguous. I think that he obviously this is based off a very traumatic time in his life, and from what I know of the history of John Davis, he has had quite a lot of
Yeah,
tragic
very.
events in his life. But this song is definitely aimed towards someone who obviously abused him as a
Mm.
child. I've heard different accounts on who the actual character is who
Yeah,
did
same.
this,
Yeah.
but I think the main point of the song and why it's called Daddy and why there's that kind of introduction to his mother at the beginning of it is a lot of his frustrations were on the fact that he wasn't believed as a kid
Yeah,
and he did actually speak out. I don't want to dwell on this too long, but I think a
yeah,
lot of the problems with abuse is usually it's people don't speak out on it,
yeah.
and that's how it becomes a problem. Whereas this obviously was the opposite, where he was speaking out about it, and he wasn't believed because
Yeah.
it was a different time back then, and
Mm.
who's going to believe a kid
Yeah,
over a
exactly.
well respected adult?
It's a tale as old as time, isn't it, with regards to stuff like that? Very
Yeah,
dark subject. The crying bit at the end is quite tough to listen to. When I first
yeah.
listened back to it, that bit sort of did stop me in my tracks.
Going back to first take, isn't it? It's
Yeah,
like that
yeah.
that just happened
And Ross Robinson,
and it was left in, and it was a very
genius. Ross
yeah,
Robinson leaving that bit in was genius, to be honest with you, because that could have easily been cut
yeah,
out. And then like I don't know whether John Davis made the decision to leave it in or the producer made the decision to leave it in, but either way, it works perfectly. And the fact that it closes out the album is a bit of a cliffhanger, isn't it? It's a bit like, wow, what have we just listened to from start to
yeah.
finish? To end it like that, it must have been at the time to listen to it must have been like, wow, what's this band gonna do next?
I can't think of any other songs from any other band that are that personal, that
That's saying,
upsetting, and that kind of like disturbing and
mm,
raw.
yeah.
I can think of plenty of songs that try to do that.
Oh
I
yeah,
can think of one song in particular that tries to do that and does it in very poor taste.
very poor. And when we could be discussing that song all day, couldn't we?
I am.
It's
Let's
down with the sickness.
we're getting into it. We're gonna have to get to it. So the Disturbed's down in the sickness. Quick little side quest here. So Disturbed. What can we say about Disturbed? Again, we were both big fans of Disturbed at some point in our lives,
I was a huge Disturbed
but
fan. Yeah,
I look back on Disturbed with a bit of a face palm, a bit of
same.
hands in my head, and a bit of. I think some of the stuff musically they did was very good. I think the music's very good.
Later in the career,
Later in the career, yeah,
that first album for me has aged so badly.
oh yeah, yeah. It like when they started focusing more on being a metal band than trying to hop on the new genre
Yeah.
trend. Cats are fighting outside. They're getting down with the sickness.
Oh dear.
I don't know what to do. So down with the sickness. There's a bit in
Painful.
down in the sickness, and it's just you can imagine everyone involved in the creation of that song, and I don't know how no one stood up and said maybe we should cut that part out.
Oh yeah.
There's a it's basically been dubbed as the domestic abuse breakdown,
Yeah. Basically, yeah.
and it is basically the lead singer reenacting a scene
His mother
of,
beating him to
of
death.
his mum beating him, and then he has enough and he goes to kill his mum.
Yeah. So
I
it's basically the polar opposite of Daddy for me. It's I
yeah,
listen to it and I think, oh, just stop. It's so tacky, isn't it?
It's so poorly, and it's an example of this going terribly wrong.
Yeah, it is.
And Daddy could have been this, and I think at some point in my life,
Yeah.
I did see Daddy as this.
Mm,
I think I've done like a 360. So originally when I first heard this song, like obviously it like fucking broke my heart.
yeah.
And then as I got older, I thought, oh, I don't know why that was a bit of a that's weird. And then
Yeah,
coming back on it again now in an adult frame of mind, it's back to them original feelings.
you're absolutely right. I
Yeah,
agree. I couldn't agree more with that sentiment. The fact that the older you get and the more mature you get, the harder this song hits for me. So overall, to sum this album up, I originally gave it a 6 out of 10. I've decided to bump it up to a 7 out of 10. I think this is a damn good album and it's aged well. It's the signature Corn song, the Corn sound right out of the gate. Massively influential for a reason. You still hear influences from this album in bands of today. Plenty of bands have chased this sound in the 90s and failed to hit the heights. Bands like Cold Chamber, I'm looking at you. Korn themselves have never really topped this album for me. So overall, I'd give this a 7 out of 10, even in my current frame of mind as a non Korn fan in quotations. I think this album is damn solid.
I'm going to be quite generous and give it an 8 out of
Mm.
10.
Yeah,
Again, I agree with pretty much everything you say. It's great from non-null album. Really, really amazing start out the gate. Has it have they topped it? No, but
yeah,
yes, but no, but kind of a little bit. I feel like this album and its sound and what it is very different. And I think the good thing about Korn that you can compliment them on is they didn't kind of turn too much into a cliche, and they did actually try and steer the ship in different
yeah,
directions. And
definitely.
but this album is extremely unique. It's a one of a kind album. Great, solid 8 out of 10. No complaints.
2 thumbs up for the debut Korn album.
So moving on a couple of years now to 1996, I
Yeah,
believe,
it is.
we get their sophomore album. Life is Peachy. Do you want to give your thoughts on Life is Peachy?
Yeah, Life is Peachy picks off pretty much where the self-titled album left off. Same gritty, dirty sound. First thoughts upon listening, this album is actually better than I remember it being. I wasn't huge on Life is Peachy growing up, even when I was a massive Korn fan at the time. But looking back on it now, especially having listened to it directly after listening to the debut album, I think this album's another solid one. It's the first time that scatting vocals appear on a Korn album. Won't be the last, but it's the first time scatting vocals appear on a Korn album, and it's the first thing you hear when you hit play on the goddamn thing. To be honest with you, so Twist is the opening track.
Yeah,
It's just a minute long, isn't it?
yeah.
It seems like feels like a track that should be basically in the middle of the album as like a little bit of a joke, but it opens the album up for better or worse.
This album is the one that's currently freshest in my mind because I
Yeah,
listened to this just a couple of days ago. Got it on vinyl, and my thoughts on Life is Peachy is usually with second albums like it's easy to kind of like they're notorious for being not
yeah.
great.
Sophomore slump, isn't it?
Yeah, because usually I think the attitude is you do you tour for years, you build up, you get your you get your deal, you make your album, you put your best tracks on that album, then you're not having enough time in between album cycles to really write and focus on writing and making another solid set of songs.
Yeah,
You tour and then you chuck right back in the studio to pick up the momentum. And I certainly do think there's a dip in quality
yeah.
between this first album and the second album.
I do sort of agree that it doesn't hit the heights of the first album in general, as an overall listen. I do think there's tracks on here that are as good as anything on
Oh
the
yeah,
first album.
certainly, yeah, yeah,
She,
yeah,
Lost, and Swallow is a great
yeah.
run of tracks for me.
I think in that sense though, this would have made a great 4 or 5 track EP.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah,
I think something that I've got to give it a compliment and also a complaint at the same time is with this album, you feel as if you're in the studio. Now that's good because it can give you a very kind of intimate kind of sound, a very personal, like connection with the band kind of sound.
yeah,
It's bad because it also just feels like you're sat in the corner of the room watching
yeah.
guys goof off
Jamming,
and
yeah,
jam
yeah,
out. Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
I think jamming's an interesting one because some bands are like the jam is fundamental,
yeah,
and the kind of the looseness and the improv is fundamental to their
yeah,
very being. Some other bands you prefer their songs to be a bit more like well written and fine
yeah,
tuned. I think Korn are kind of like in the middle. I think the kind of jams that they could kind of come out with are interesting,
Mm.
but they need to be structured and they need to be like worked on.
Yeah,
And I think
we see what happens further down the line when KoRn try and go experimental.
yeah,
It doesn't always go to plan, does it?
I think the biggest sins for me on this album are stuff like Porno Creep,
Yeah,
the twist, as you mentioned. It's funny, it's cute, it's a meme,
yeah,
but
yeah.
it's a
It's a
bit
meme. Yeah,
at the same time. I think it kind of loses a bit of the professional feel of the first album in a way, and it
I
does just
agree.
seem like a bit of fooling around, which as you say can work. But you look at the album art, and you look at everything that's kind of being portrayed from the band at this period of time, and it just doesn't really feel like it.
Doesn't feel like
Like
they're
it,
taking themselves seriously, does it? It feels a
yeah,
bit like you said. It feels a
yeah,
bit like they're experimenting, throwing a few ideas out there just to see if they work or
yeah.
not. It feels a bit like don't know what the word is. It's experimental, but it's just got
It's
a lot of weird moments on it that they don't
yeah,
really
yeah.
explore further into the career,
A bit,
like Porno
yeah.
Creep, the K Symbols song.
Oh, that
Um,
oh that is one of the biggest sins ever committed to man.
there's
That is
bizarre
such.
links.
That's what I mean. Such an immature. Like maybe I'm just a bit of an old stick in the mud, but I don't really want to hear about crusty old nips swinging from your saggy old hips and your
Well,
crusty horrible. I don't even want to repeat the words because it just feels fucking horrible.
I've made a note of some of the lyrics here, so you can just judge them for yourself if you're listening
Let's
to
go
this.
on, crack them out.
Tit sucking, ass licking, ball bitch, fat hairy mole, and then I've just put etc. etc. So that goes to so that's basically a summary of what this song is. It's again, it's like shock value for the sake of it, isn't it?
Yeah, this is the kind of stuff that, like, the thing is with Korn is, as big as they got and as popular as they got, they would also kind of seen as like outcasts. And a lot of, I went into this a couple of episodes ago, kind of about like how emo was given a bit of a tough ride back in the mid 2000s, and a lot about like the metal elitism that exists. And I think there was a lot of people who turn their like backs on music like this because they did see it as like improper or silly or
Yeah,
daft or cringe or something of like just in the moment kind of thing. I don't think songs like that help because
no,
if
they
like
don't.
going back to the story, play my dad shoots and ladders. I can't imagine what his fucking reaction would
Wow,
have been to hearing that
imagine.
song. He
Im-
probably would have just got up and fucking turned the thing off.
Please just imagine that for 1 second.
Yeah. So it's stuff like that, and then you've got like
Good God is a great song for
oh,
me.
Good God's a brilliant song.
Good,
That's what I mean. If this album was like a 5 track
yeah,
EP
yeah.
with like Chi, Good God, Mister
Mr.
Rogers,
Rogers is another, yeah. That's
No
another very,
Place to Hide and Kill You,
yeah.
it would have been a banger. It would have been top notch, just like the first album. And it just feels like a bit of a shame that they did try and like there's a weird, bizarre
They've done,
lowrider cover.
yeah. I was just about to mention Lowrider. It's like a 1 minute long version of Lowrider. So
Mm,
it's like they sort of start to cover the song Lowrider, which is by a funk band called War. You've probably all heard it, but they only do like a minute of the song and then like just give up on it and couldn't be asked.
yeah.
And it's like, well, did this need to be on the album? I don't think it did.
Yeah, keeping it in the album exactly.
Same with Ass Itch. That's another one that's just
Oh,
a bit like
fuck's sake.
it's like there's a lot of strange little half interlude type songs on this album, isn't there, that don't
Yeah.
go over too well. I like Mr. Rogers. Obviously, the lyrics again are very dark about him. It's about an experience. Is it about an experience he personally had, or is it a reference to something else?
I think it's going back to that experience he had, but I think the whole kind of concept of Mister Rogers was like this old show in America called Mister Rogers, and it was like I think he used to say something like welcome to the neighborhood, I'm your neighbor. That's what he used to
Yeah,
say. Like he'd be like, howdy y'all, I'm your neighbor, Mister Rogers.
yeah, yeah,
And he was like seen as like this absolute like gold standard moral standard of
mm,
he was kind of portraying a world that just didn't really exist in
yeah,
the real world in a way. So I think the song is kind of taking a stab at that,
yeah,
going, you told me that life was sunshine and rainbows,
yeah,
and you said you're my neighbor,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
when in reality his neighbors were pretty bad.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah,
It is an interesting concept. I never knew that story. Again, I just listened to this song and assumed it was a direct personal experience from John Davis. But it goes to show that at this point in the band's career, They were very good songwriters, like genuinely, weren't they, lyrically and musically. The sound of this album, I don't think we've really touched on it, but it's pretty much the same as the first album, isn't it? With Fieldy's crunchy bass, Monkey's shrill guitar chords they're still all there, aren't they? There's not really anything in the way of pushing the envelope in terms of the music on this album, apart from the odd interlude type track and the song Wicked, which is the first time rapping featured on a KoRn album. Features Chino Moreno rapping, of all people, which I
Yeah.
thought was. I didn't know that until I started listening back to this on Spotify when he was listed. I was like, that's Chino Moreno from Deftones doing the rapping. How random.
Is it a cover or is it like
No,
an original song?
it's an original song with
Yeah,
Chino Moreno's guest vocals.
yeah. I mean, it's a very good rap. Don't get me
Yeah,
wrong.
I think it's a decent track. I do. I
Yeah,
think it's quite catchy. I mean, Kill You. We've just touched on it briefly. It's a really good closer for me. It's dark again, just like Daddy.
yeah. It's like Daddy, but it's a lot more of an easy listen.
Yeah,
Because
it's more angry. It's
yeah,
more angry than upset lyrics, and it's more sort of John Davis is just like he's seething, sort of.
yeah. It doesn't go quite as far as Daddy goes, but in a way, it's just as good, just as strong, and just as powerful. Saying all that, as I say, this really is a mixed bag of an
Yeah,
album, like a mixed bag. I always struggle with kind of like rating mixed bags because I want to praise it for its highs, but then I want to kind of punish it for its lows.
yeah,
So I think, so I gave the first album an 8. I think I'll probably give this one a 6, and I'm locking it in. It's
yeah.
a 6.
I'm going to agree with you. This is a 6 out of 10 album for me. I think there's more to like on this album than there is to dislike on it. I think the core sound of the band is they're still sounding strong. They're still sounding full of fire, full of energy. There's a couple of experiments that go awry, but in general, I found this album to be. I was pleasantly surprised at how much I enjoyed it compared to what I thought I would going into it.
I always forget the year of this album. Is it 97?
98.
98? 98, Follow the Leader. Here we go.
Speaking of mixed bags,
Yeah. So I think you've got quite a bit of criticism about this album.
yeah, I mean that's
I'm a bit more forgiving
yeah.
to it, to be honest.
I listened back to it for a second time a couple of days ago. There are a lot of strong tracks. There's actually some career highs on this album.
Yeah, you've got to actually, yeah, going in. I think this is the album that sent them into the
Yeah,
stratosphere.
absolutely.
Um,
With Freak on a Leash.
Freak on a Leash, hands down, easily their well most known,
Yeah,
famous song, biggest song that
easily.
they've
Yeah,
had. Yeah.
and it's still a great song in my opinion. I still really like this song. I still think it hits as hard as it always did. First things first, Ross Robinson is not on this album.
Oh yeah. So that's something we'll go back to. So KoRn,
Yeah,
first KoRn album and Life is Peachy were kind of retroactively dubbed KoRn 1 and 2, weren't they?
So Ross Robinson is not on the production
Yeah,
on this album.
we're a while away from KoRn 3 yet.
Yeah, and
Thankfully.
it's straight away. It sounds very different, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's more polished and commercial sounding than the previous two. It opens strongly, I think. It's on and Freak on a Leash, and the end of It's On flows perfectly into Freak on a Leash. It's a really strong track. Scatting verse comes in on Freak on a Leash. It's one of the best scatting verses they've done.
Yeah, I was just about to say it's probably one of the few times it's genuinely worked
Yeah,
and felt like a part of the song and been an integral part of the song that without that it would feel like it's missing. Whereas I think KoRn kind of clocked on that they've got like these kind of these memes, or let's use a less like modern term for it. They knew they had these like gimmicks and kind of hooks and
yeah,
things they were well known for. And I think as time went on, they started playing and playing into it more. Kind of like Easter eggs in a
yeah.
video game or in a film or something like that. But Freak on a Leash is well done, to be honest.
It's a very innovative song in the genre, isn't it? Like I said,
Yeah,
no other new metal band. 1998 was the peak of new metal. No other band was doing the scatting worthy like that. That was a very Korn thing.
yeah.
That was something they trademarked. Monkey's guitar riffs are iconic as well, and they were never. That was another thing that was unique to Korn. The little one to two note little airy.
I'm
Beep.
gonna have to give you an actually here. I'm gonna have to throw you in with an actually.
Okay.
You give Monkey credit for Head's work.
Oh, was that head?
Head
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
head was the noise man.
Fair enough.
Head was the riffs. Head was the
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
was the high notes. Monkey kind of was more of
Just the rhythm.
the rhythm.
Yeah.
I think they did kind of share roles and harmonise, and I think Monkey did a bit, but a lot of that stuff came from Head. and you notice it's not there when he's not there.
Yeah,
But again,
definitely. We'll get to that.
we're jumping ahead there.
Yeah, further into the album we're going, and there's nothing that jumps up to got the life and dead bodies everywhere. There's nothing up to this point in the album that makes me stop and think, oh dear. These are pretty decent tracks. Got the life, I used to love it, but it's not as good as I remember it being. I don't know why. Something missing about it. I don't
I
know.
never loved it that much. It was
Yeah,
another one of them, like when you think of bands like greatest hits collections,
yeah,
sometimes like the best hits aren't really like the best hits. You know what I
yeah.
mean? I always found that I've got the life. Like that intro's great and the pacing and all that, but I think when
It's
the
got a very
chorus
bouncy.
comes in,
Yeah,
it's a bit.
it's got the nice bouncy groove, but it sort of
Oh
like doesn't really go anywhere, does it?
no!
Dead Bodies Everywhere is similar to me. It's a decent track, that, but we come to Children of Corn, and this is where
Oh,
things start to go a little bit awry for me. It's got some of the most annoying vocals from John Davis that I have ever heard laid to tape.
busting
What's he
and the children of the.
what's he doing with the what is he doing? Like,
Oh, I don't know.
it goes into Ice Cube's featured on this song, the first legitimate rapper that's featured on a Korn song. You think he does a half decent job. He tries to save the track in the chorus, but every time that chorus finishes, John Davis just pops his head back up to ruin it, and I don't know what he was going for on this song with his pronunciations of words. This is when he starts to experiment with
Yeah.
weird pronunciations of words.
Going back to outdated things and things that don't really fly in today's society and stuff like that. This is a song that kind of feels very uncomfortable to me
Yeah,
because I don't even know what the fuck it's meant to be about.
I don't know who it's
But
supposed to appeal to.
posting porn for the children of the corn, and it's just like, what is this? Like,
Is it supposed to be appealing to a hip hop crowd? Because hip hop fans will hate it for John Davis's vocals.
yeah.
If it's supposed to appeal to Korn fans, then even then, I just think it's like,
I think it was. I think it was appealing to corn fans of the time.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Like again, as we say, I think there is a reason that Korn are a band that people can and do grow out of it, and I think this is it. I think sometimes they often touch on various topics, like we've gone into some very dark topics like abuse, bullying, and really harsh things like that, and then they seem to like to talk about sex,
yeah. It's a
but
very
whenever it's
strange.
done, it's kind of like how a 14-year-old would think sex is. Like it just seems very stupid and
It's funny you should
yeah.
mention. It's funny you should mention juvenile humor because we're about to come to some juvenile humor.
Go on, what's next? I can't remember.
We've got BBK and Pretty, which are decent tracks. There's not much to
Oh,
say about them.
Peachy's great, and
Yeah,
that's a really dark one as well.
yeah,
That's about like I think that's about like kind of a corpse. You know what I mean? Because John did do some work in a
right.
like a moratorium, something like that.
Right.
So I think that is based on like a true story, and you know like stumbling upon this absolute like mess of a corpse.
Wow. Didn't know that. I didn't know. I
Yeah.
never ever knew that. No, that's interesting. That. So the two decent tracks. However, things take, in my opinion, an incredible nosedive after this point in the album because we've then got All in the Family, which is quite possibly the worst thing that this band has ever done.
I
And
think this
one
is
of the worst
probably
things.
their most problematic album. Like when you
Yeah.
think of today's sensibilities and what people kind of do and don't accept, this
Oh God.
album
Yeah.
really does touch a few close lines, doesn't it?
This song is just so it's unlistenable in my opinion.
Hmm.
The concept of the song is a rap battle between John Davis and Fred Durst. Fred Durst
Which
featured on this album.
which at the time would have been massive.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
Limp Bizkit
That
were
is like
huge. '98.
that was like I can't even think of like a modern equivalent of that, but that would have been like fucking what Taylor Swift and Lady Gaga
Yeah,
doing
yeah,
it
yeah.
doing a collab. Well, Lady Gaga's a bit like outdated now.
Still,
Who's
no, still a massive
fucking
name. Still a massive
that's
name.
what I mean. But this is two titans of the genre,
Mm.
like two
It-
new metal.
It's like Taylor
Like
Swift. It's like Taylor Swift and Ariana Grande
yeah,
collaborating now,
it
isn't
would
it?
be, wouldn't it? Yeah.
The lyrics on this song are so laughably bad. They're not funny. They're not witty in the slightest. It's basically a collection of playground insults, but being used by 28-year-old grown men, isn't it?
But as a
Homophobe.
kid, I fucking loved it, and I think that's it. I think they were playing to their audience, and they knew their audience, and I think this is why
Yeah,
there is a lot of people who look back on Korn as like a band of their childhood or juvenile kind of immaturity and stuff like, you know.
This takes it too far for me, though. This isn't. It isn't even. It isn't even, like I said, witty or funny or anything. It's just
Yeah.
embarrassing. There's a bit in this song where Fred Durst says something like, "You gotta get away," and in the background, John Davis goes, "Get a gay," and I'm like,
That's
"What?"
something you do in primary.
Like, like you have
Something
like
you do in like year 8, isn't it?
your 10-year-old daughter would not find that line funny. That's how. That's that. She is too mature
I
for this
found it.
song.
This is it. When I first heard that song, I thought it was fucking hilarious. I was like, "So get a gay."
That's just that is that basically that basically sums this song up, doesn't it? I mean, I can't
Yeah.
talk anymore about this song. You've just got to go and listen to it. It's just go and listen to it, if anything, just for a laugh, because it's possibly, like I said, the worst thing this band's ever done. Possibly the worst thing any new metal band has ever done, and I include Disturbed in that.
Something I've got to mention while we're in this album review is, again, I'm not like a proper Korn historian. I don't know all the ins and outs of all the makings of, but I know enough to kind of get by. I could probably swing. I could probably get a good enough grade at Corn University or something like that. So this album, obviously, as I say, this was when they were hitting it big. They were given a fuck ton of money for this album, like a fuck ton of money,
Yeah,
and they just spent most of it on fucking drugs
yeah.
and alcohol. I think throughout the making of this album, they were off their fucking cakes, and
You
it
can
shows.
you can tell, yeah, you can tell.
This again, it goes back to like that Life of Peachy, where it's like there's a bit of goofing around,
Hmm.
and again, you can, like, as a band, I don't want to be like, you can't have fun, you got to be serious.
Oh
Do a
no.
song about getting hit by a car. You can have a bit of fun. You can goof off. Everyone can have a silly song here and there, but I think it's not playing to their strengths when they do that. I think
No.
their strengths are being more of a like almost borderline gothic sometimes. Like,
All in the Family is a song that would maybe have worked better on a Limp Bizkit album with John Davis as a
oh yeah,
featured guest,
100%.
because
That's Limp Bizkit through and through, isn't it?
that song is Limp Bizkit all over. It's not Korn. It's not Korn's strengths. If Limp Bizkit do have any strengths at all,
Oh, they've
it's
got some strengths. Come on, be
it,
fair.
it's something like that, where you've got a very immature listening audience that will probably eat that shit up. I'm just gonna have to move on from that track now because I
Yeah.
can't think about it anymore. I've just got to make a note of, again, there's the first half of this album is fairly solid, and then the second half of the album it just falls off a cliff. Justin is a nondescript track,
I
which
don't know, Justin.
it has a very weird vocal effect in the
Oh
chorus,
yeah,
makes him sound like
time.
he's underwater.
Oh.
It's like, who added that? Who added that effect on? Don't know who the producer was for this album, but Ross Robinson wouldn't have had any of that. Seed, you quite like Seed, don't you? It's not a bad core track, but it does have a bit in it that I just think is just absolutely sucks. It's that scatting verse that comes in after the second chorus, I think. And it's like a two-part scatting verse with like a little ambient interlude in the middle, and there's like pitch shifted chipmunk vocals all over the scatting, and I'm like, whose idea was that? Was that the producer's idea? Was that John Davis's idea? Who knows?
It'd be interesting. That you should have done this before doing a podcast about them, but I'd like to know who actually was the producer on that album.
Yeah, I didn't. All I knew that was it wasn't Ross Robinson. That's the only
Yeah,
thing I knew.
yeah.
Cameltosis is the next track in the track list. It's a rap feature. Someone I've never heard of, Slim Kid 3. It's one of the worst tracks on the whole album. The lyrics in the chorus made me burst out laughing when he says, "I cannot ever love another cunt," and then just the word "cunt" just comes in. I
Yeah.
don't know whether I'm allowed to say that word on this podcast or not. Whether it'll
Oh,
get bleeped out.
it's all right.
But like is a word that doesn't sound good in any context in any song. You can't fit that word into any song, in my opinion, and make it sound good. It's just not. It's not a musical word, is it?
I think something that kind of very really like popped in my head now is how influential hip hop and rap music was to Korn, especially in their early days.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I think a lot of hip hop and rap has that silly, goofy shit and that crude
yeah,
language
definitely.
and behavior. And I think a lot of it is them being inspired.
I've listened to a fair bit of hip hop in my time, but I don't think I recall ever hearing that word pop up in a hip hop song. Obviously, the N word and various other words, but it just sounded it just when it
Yeah.
coming out of John Davis's mouth as well. It made me burst out laughing out loud.
I think they were just enjoying being like controversial and being
Yeah,
like
definitely.
a bit outrageous, like being edgy. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Being a bit edgelord at the time. Like,
We'll have to finish the review of this album on a positive note with My Gift to You, the closer, is one of the best songs on the album. It's got a
oh
very, very
yeah,
heavy, slow tempo. Sounds almost stoner metal influenced, actually,
yeah,
with the. It's like it goes hard. It was one of the highlights of the album for me. The album's bookended by really good tracks. What happens in the middle is just varies from okay to outright garbage.
yeah. That's a common thing with a lot of albums. Really, I think being a vinyl listener,
Yeah,
I listen to the albums in full, and two of the things you pick up on is the middle slump and the second half not being good as the first half. I think they're very common things that I don't really know why they do it, or if if the artists are even like conscious or aware of it.
mm,
I think this album, it definitely does have that kind of like middle slump, and
yeah.
it doesn't really quite. The end isn't good enough to
No, 'cause
stick through to the end,
No, because it's only
so
one.
it's
It's only
kind of
one. It's only one track, isn't it? It's like a
yeah,
little
yeah.
bit of a tail at the end,
Hmm.
and then the album's over. So for me, I've got to give this album a 4 out of 10. I think it's got
Oh,
some of the band's best tracks on it, but mixed with some of the very worst tracks, and the low points on the album are what drag it down so much for me. Because the low points on Life is Peachy were nowhere near as bad as the low points on this for
Bema.
me. Nice choice.
Again, with Life as Peachy, mixed bag. The great songs are great. The
Mm,
bad songs are bad.
yeah.
At least to the credit of this album is the bad songs are actually songs and not just kind of like
Yeah.
interlude staff stuff. At least they've actually been produced and completed and the complete
Yeah.
songs.
That
I'll
is
give
true.
them that.
That is true.
If you're a 14-year-old and you're a bit dim, like I was, you'll fucking love All in the Family. So 10 out of 10 recommend that. So I think I'm probably going to put it on the same level, equal to Life is Peachy.
Ooh,
6 out of 10.
okay. Yeah, fair enough.
I feel I'm being generous there. I
Yeah,
could have gone lower, but
fair enough.
so it's getting no higher than a 6.
Yeah, I won't argue with that.
Now we get into what I feel is one of my favourite albums. And I think a lot of the criticisms that I've given the band so far all scrubbed away with this album. This album is kind of a lot more serious, a lot more darker in tone, and a lot more tighter and well organised and structured.
Hmm.
And that is 1999 Issues.
Issues, here we go. We've always been sort of, well, I was obviously a huge fan of this album back in the day, and I was always aware that this was your favourite KoRn album.
Yeah.
It was back in the day, and it probably still is now.
Yeah, I'd say it is, yeah.
However, I have some issues
Issues with
with it.
issues.
Some
Oh,
issues with issues, yeah. So first of all, they have done away with all of the rap features on this album. As soon as you look at the track list, you can see that. However, they've replaced them with your favourite thing in the world, interludes. There's so many interludes on this album. There's about 5 or 6, I think,
yeah,
which
yeah.
includes the intro, which doesn't need to be on the album. These interludes, they're all terrible. They're not good at all. They add nothing. And if anything, I think they interrupt the flow of the album. The first track, like I said, doesn't need to be on the album. It's a bagpipe intro, which is about a minute and a half long. They should just start the album at track 2 because Falling Away From Me has an intro of its own, which sounds like the intro to the album. To me, when I listen to this album, I just start it at Falling Away From Me.
Yeah, fair enough.
Falling Away From Me, by the way, is a banger of a track. It's one of KoRn's best.
Yeah, yeah.
One of the biggest songs as well. One of the biggest singles. It's better than pretty much everything off Follow the Leader for me. Falling Away From Me gets a big fat thumbs up from me. However, I will say one thing about the production on this album that you notice straight away. It's noticeably muddier, and I don't know what. It was 1999, so it was the Loudness War era. I don't know whether there was compression issues.
Yeah, I feel like there must have been, to be honest. Again, I think this has really started hopping from producer to producer. Sometimes the ups and downs to that. I think the ups of it is, you can get a lot of different sounds and you can again different albums can have whole completely different like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
things
It's
to.
variety, isn't it?
The
Yeah.
problem is every time you hop onto a new producer, it's kind of starting anew. They don't know you, they're trying to get to know you
Yeah.
and get to know your sound. Whereas a band that pretty much sticks with the same producer throughout, like the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Yeah, yeah.
Rick Rubin knows the Red Hot Chili
Yeah.
Peppers. He knows what they want. He knows what the
What
fan
fans
base want.
yeah, yeah.
He knows how to make them sound. Obviously, there was a bit of controversy around Californication.
Yeah, which was the same year that this album came out.
Yeah, so
And
maybe '99 was just a bit of a
yeah, it suffers from similar issues with like, the bass and
similar issues.
yeah, similar issues. It's like the bass and the guitar on this album feel like they're sort of bleeding into each other at times.
Yeah, because there's definitely songs on this album that you want to turn the volume like right the fuck up and you want it blasting, but
Yeah,
it does sound muddy and it does come across a bit messy. And
yeah,
it's
yeah,
a terrible shame that because I think,
yeah,
as we say, the songs themselves are great. Like "Falling Away from Me" is brilliant. "Trash." So I've
yeah.
one lyric that is always a bit of a head scratcher. And it's just kind of like,
You've made a note of a lyric here. Let's see
yeah,
if it's the same lyric.
it will be. It fucking will be. Is it the one? Go on, you've actually got the lyric. You read it.
Your feelings, I can't help but rape them. What does that mean? Can someone explain that to me? Just
No,
that
it
bit of
wasn't.
silence
It
there.
wasn't that lyric. It wasn't that lyric. It's the one about. Oh, I don't even want to read it out. It's the one where he mentions little girls or something like
I
that.
can't even remember that.
Oh, it's something like these little girls. They get
Oh
me.
yeah, feel so. Oh yeah, they do make me
Yeah.
feel so goddamn exhilarated. Yeah,
Now,
yeah.
there's a lot of older
Oh,
songs that use the term. I think it means something different to what it kind of gets
yeah,
interpreted as.
yeah. I
But
forgot about that lyric.
it's a bit of what it's a bit of a
Oh yeah.
a fly in the ointment
When
kind of thing. It kind of really ruins
when
a
when
great
you
track.
when you listen to it, you sort of jump a bit, don't you? Oh God, where did that come
Yeah,
from?
I know. Yeah, like
So yeah, I mean, like I said, I put Trash was a decent track with some questionable lyrics. That was the note I made about Trash, and I can't really sum it up any more than that. For You is the next interlude on the album, which could have been a half decent track, I think, if it was sort of the intro to a full length track or was
mm,
made into a full length track. But they decided to make it about 90 seconds long and then just cut it there and then lead into Beg for Me, which it doesn't flow into Beg for Me. For me, it's poorly placed in the album.
I think For You probably would have been a good intro to the album.
Yeah,
To be
should have,
honest,
yeah.
again, short songs do bother me to an extent. There's a time and a place for
Oh,
them.
definitely.
Sometimes you like a good 3 minute like the band. My band sat and split. We barely broke 4 minutes in a
Mm.
song, especially on our recorded versions, and it worked for that. But there really is something like when you do want more. And as you say,
For You is a track that left me wanting it more from it.
yeah, yeah, definitely. I think For You, out of all them interludes, is the strongest one
Mm.
out of the bunch.
Yeah, I've got Make Me Bad as a highlight on the album.
Oh yeah,
I always did love that track. It's got a really good use of piano in the verses to sort of build up some tension. You'll know what I mean when you listen to
yeah, I'll
it.
have to have a
Yeah,
re-listen to
it's like a piano or like a keyboard, which sounds like a piano in the background. It's quite eerie and ominous. I think there's a drum machine as well in the verse, but it works. It really does sound good. It's gonna go away, and Am I Going Crazy are more crap interludes. That's the note I put.
that.
I think I had Am I Going Crazy as one of the worst interludes on the album.
Oh,
It's just
100%.
John Davis
That
trying
is
to
my
be.
one.
It's just him trying to be like creepy, isn't it? Just like whispering verse, isn't it? Whispering is like his lines in the background with like haunted house foreground music over
Yeah,
the top of
I
it.
think like again going back, like this album is like almost borderline gothic.
It's trying to
It's
be gothic, isn't it?
it's trying to be a bit goth, and I think it's probably why I quite like it because I'm into that kind of stuff.
Same. I love a good gothic album, but
Yeah,
it's like
like it's
half-hearted.
gonna go away, and am I going crazy? Yeah,
Yeah.
I can't. I don't have too much time for them
No,
songs.
and they sandwich one of the worst full-length tracks on this album for me. Wake Up. Wake the fuck. So I wasn't a fan of that track. Move on quickly. This run of tracks for me is a tough listen, and it sort of like
Yeah,
interrupts the flow of the album.
going back to that kind of second half,
Yeah,
kind of not as strong as the first half.
this is like a middle portion, very much a middle of the album slump for me. Hey Daddy is a forgettable track as
I
well.
like Hey Daddy.
Hey.
Bum, dum, 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 bigger than a bum.
Somebody Someone though is definitely a highlight on the
Oh
album.
yeah, 100%. Yeah,
That is a tune. Let's get this party started.
it's okay.
The chorus, yeah, the chorus is just a bit
Yeah,
lazy. It's a
it
bit
feels
lazy.
like the bad term of first draft. I remember when I first saw the track listing. I think this is probably the second or third KoRn album I ever had. I think the first was the greatest hits, obviously, and then this must have been the second. Then I remember looking at the track listing and thinking, "Is that a cover of the
Oh yeah.
Black Eyed Peas.
Is it Pink or the Black Eyed Peas or?
One of them, yeah, yeah.
Oh
I
no, it's
thought it was
Black
going
Eyed
to be,
Peas. It's
yeah.
Black
I
Eyed
thought
Peas.
let's get it started. Oh my
Imagine.
god! Oh, you could see I was in for the shock when I heard that.
Oh, imagine. Wish You Could Be Me is the worst interlude on the album. It's the I am going insane and with the little squeaky dog toy noises in the
You
background hanging on.
fucking posh.
And then it ends with that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolute garbage. Counting and Dirty are the last two tracks on the album. They've got nice little bass melodies, actually.
Oh yeah, I do like this. And
Fi-
Compton.
Fieldy plays some nice little bass melodies there where he's actually playing, not just slapping the
Yeah,
neck.
that's definitely something that I think you can kind of pull him up on.
Yeah.
Although that bass sound is so unique and stands out, and again, it's rarely copied or no one else pulls it off like him.
No.
Sometimes it does come across as a bit lazy,
One trick
a
pony, yeah.
bit, but yeah, a bit one trick pony again. Going back to like kind of like their cliches, like the scat and the bagpipes, and
Yeah, yeah.
this is
Corn,
what we're
corn,
known for, so
yeah.
let's throw it in the song kind of mentality.
It's cornisms, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's one of the cornisms. But when he wants to lay down a nice little melody on the bass, he can do it. And Counting and Dirty are two tracks where he does it. Dirty ending with 4 minutes of static was a bit of a what's going on here moment. Left me confused. And to be honest, it left me confused about the whole album because I was thinking, do I like this album? Do I dislike this album? And in the end, I settled for bang in the middle. I give this a 5 out of 10, unfortunately. So yeah, I was a bit confused about whether I like this album, whether I dislike this album. In the end, I went bang in the middle, and I've got to give this a 5 out of 10. Unfortunately, yeah, I think the interludes really take a lot away from the flow of the album, make it feel bloated and feel longer than it is because it's not that long an album. The length of the track list makes it feel like the album's longer than it is. Some of the band's strongest material is on this album, and it could do with a remaster. For them reasons, I've gone with 5 out of 10.
you know what? You've kind of thrown me for a loop here, to be honest, because I started this saying, "Oh, this is the best. It's my favorite." Now you brought up a lot of the things, and it's kind of sunk in.
Oh,
I do kind of go, yeah, there is a bit that lets it down. To
yeah.
be fair,
Have I put a seed of doubt in your mind about
it
this album?
again with a remaster, it could be a completely different beast of its own.
Yeah,
I think KoRn are dying for the whole discography remaster and a proper re-release system,
yeah,
but I don't really know where they are with when it comes to the rights and stuff like that. I think I'm still going to be generous. Still going to give it a decent score. I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10.
I feel like I've
Better than the last two albums. A lot better than the last two albums. It doesn't top the debut.
no.
I still think it's probably my favourite corn album. It's probably still the corn album I'm always going to go to when I'm like, well, you
Yeah,
know what, let's put a corn album on. Why not?
yeah,
It's probably
yeah.
going to be Issues.
Fair enough. Like I said, I think you can pick a good handful of songs out of this album, take them out of the album context, and play them on their own, and they do sound good. They are good songs. The songwriting's a lot better on this album than it was on Follow the Leader
Yeah,
in general.
I think that's my biggest kind of praise for this album. What I like the best of it is it was a lot more focused and they were reined in a lot more
Yeah,
and disciplined a lot more. And I know at this time John Davis had gone completely sober at this point, so the kind of at least on his end, the excess and the drugs were not kind of ruining the quality of the music. Fortunately, that couldn't be said about other band members,
yeah.
which would eventually come to a bit of a explosion too far ahead in the future at this point in 1999.
Hmm.
But let's zip forward to 2002. So we're in a new decade now. We're in a new millennium now.
Ah, yeah.
New century as well. Untouchables. Now, I've been dreading this bit. I've been dreading this bit because
So have I.
to the fans and to a lot of people that I know have listened to KoRn and go for their discography, they love this album.
Yeah.
People love this album, and to be honest, I think this is the album that is put on the pedestal as KoRn's greatest album. Me and you
Hmm.
don't really share the same thoughts
So this is gonna get
as the fan base.
this is probably gonna get a bit spicy now, and this broke my heart. Re-listening to this album, this was my favorite as a kid, as a teenager. This was my favorite Korn album. I'm aware that it is a fan favorite, but my God, this was the most disappointed I have been up to this point in listening through the Korn's discography. Up to this point, this was the most disappointed I'd been listening through an album.
Yeah, I think before we did the first KoRn episode, I had a listen through to all ones I owned on vinyl. I put Issues on, and then straight after Issues, I was like, I really enjoyed that. Let's go straight into Untouchables.
Yeah.
And I thought the difference in quality was night and day.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think the same few issues really ugly head and come back in this album again, where things get, I wouldn't say silly because nothing's like deliberately goofy as it was on the old albums, but things get a bit sloppy on this album.
Mm,
I think most of the songs off this album are quite forgettable.
yeah. Do you know what my big problem with this album is? And I'm gonna go a bit different to you here. I think this suffers from the complete reversal issues that Issues did. It's the complete opposite for me. The production on this album is miles better than it was on Untouchables, on Issues even.
Yeah.
They spent a lot of money on this album in the studio, I believe.
Oh yeah, they lost money on this.
And it
Yeah.
sounds big budget. It sounds expensive. It
Yeah.
sounds clean, pristine. It sounds the heaviest album that the band's recorded to date. I can't have any complaints about the production on this album, but the songwriting takes such a huge dip from Issues that it's scary.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether did Head leave the band after Take a Look in the Mirror?
He,
Was he
he
on this
did. He
album?
did. Yeah. He's on this album and the next album.
But I believe that he was a bit of a mess, wasn't he, at this point in his life?
It was getting bad for him. The album after this was the real kind of like the band was in like crisis mode.
So it's 2002 and
Yeah, the
2003.
cracks are definitely showing at this point. The cracks are definitely showing, and I think it shows in the work and especially in the songwriting. I think again a very expensive production, very a lot of money again, and I think they were kind of just more focused on the use of what was it called, Power Tools or something like that
Oh,
back in the day. Pro
Pro
Tools,
Tools. Yeah.
that's it. I think I really don't want to like spread misinformation, but I think
Hmm.
this was like one of the first albums to kind of
Could have been 2000.
incorporate
Could have
Pro
been
Tools.
2002.
It
Yeah,
was
could have been.
very like new revolutionary technology, and I think there was a lot of excitement behind that, and I think they were very excited behind it. But let's get into some of the songs
Yeah.
and kind of. I think it'll speak for itself on
Hmm.
some of our thoughts on the actual tracks.
Yeah, Here to Stay opens the album, and it's one of the band's biggest songs, but it's not on the level of the previous singles to me. It's not on the level of A Freak on a Leash. It's
No,
not on the level of A Blind. It's not on the level of Falling Away from Me. It's just an okay song. It's a bit of a heavy, bland sort of like I can imagine it goes off live. There's nothing that makes me want to revisit this song though. It just sort of comes and goes in a bit of a blur. I think you probably feel the same, don't you, about Here to Stay?
I think the problem with Here to Stay is it has nothing to say for itself. It
Hmm.
really just has nothing to say for itself. It's a classic. It's been dubbed as the "I'm Back, Bitch" song,
Yeah.
where like a band brings out, a band or an artist brings out like the first single of a new album after a few years, and it's meant to be like, here we are, we're back, and you can tell that in the title name, like Here to Stay. I just don't really think it has much to say for itself. It was always a bit cute when it came on in K1 in the Crazy Off,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
a club we used to go to quite a bit in Liverpool, which I
Yeah.
do want to make an episode on someday eventually.
Yeah, it was a staple on K1,
Yeah, it
wasn't it? On
was.
the
It was a
first floor,
K1
Here
jingle,
to Stay
wasn't
was,
it?
yeah.
Dun, da, 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 da.
So moving on from that, Make Believe is the next track on the album, and this song is god awful for me.
Yeah,
The sounds like the chorus melody is just being made up on the spot. Why would you write this stuff? It just sounds like the bare minimum effort was put into the songwriting on this track for me.
yeah. I really, I can't forget. I haven't even. It's not even been that long since listening to this, and I can't remember Make Believe at
Yeah,
all.
it's terrible.
I think that is the crime. The biggest crime of this album is a lot of it's forgettable,
Yeah,
and I think that's probably why it gets praised so much because people forget the bad
because it's
ones
average.
and
Yeah,
just
yeah.
focus on the good ones. Going, no, this has got Here to Stay and Faultless and
Yeah, yeah. No, it hits an average sort of middle of the bell curve type thing for me. It's a mostly average album, but I just think some moments on this album stand out as particularly bad. John Davis started pronouncing his words stupidly. He's in sort of that era now where he's saying, taking me to a place I need to be. And it's like, it's off putting. It is off putting to listen to. Blame. It's pretty nice verses which show potential. Then the chorus comes in and it's just so uninspired, forgettable, and boring. It kills the momentum of the track. And this album doesn't ever get any momentum going for me because Hollow Life comes in and it's the first attempt at a ballad that the band have ever done. Really, they've got the sort of half gothic sounding instrumentation in the verse. John Davis is trying to do a bit more melodic singing. Melodies, they just don't follow life. They just sound lazy. It feels like the songwriting abilities just left
I
them
think they were
overnight.
more excited to do it so they could get into the like mess with the sliders and the effects
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and of it again, like going back to it, where it's you know you're giving someone all these expensive new toys to play with,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and you're so excited, but
That's quite true.
something gets lost in the way.
Yeah, I feel like the songwriting really got lost in the making of this album. I feel like they didn't take care with the songwriting at all. I know it was 3 years since the release of Issues, but it feels like they wrote all of these songs in pretty much the week
I
before
think
they went
because
into the
at this
studio.
point, it's you get to a point where a band that was brought in with angst, anger, trauma, misery, and a lot of these emotions, they've got a few million quid in their pockets now,
Yeah,
and I think it's getting a bit harder to kind of channel the emotions and really make it kind of genuine.
yeah, they've got
And
to appeal to a mass audience at this point, haven't
yeah,
they?
and I think they're just kind of playing a bit to their peers as well, and they're just kind of doing what the people around them are doing a bit,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's just like let's make metal with these great, you know, let's focus on the metal, let's focus on the breakdowns,
Hmm.
let's focus on the heaviness,
Let's
and
focus on being heavier than everyone else. It's this
yeah,
point where they're going. We're seeing all these up and coming bands coming up in the new metal scene, and KoRn sort of must have gone into the studio and gone, "We're going to show you how the biggest new metal band in the world does it.
yeah,
So we're
I
going to
think
spend,
egos were showing at this
and
point,
like,
and
this is
yeah,
how much we can afford to spend on a production of an album. We're going to show you what a proper produced album sounds like." But that's at the detriment of the songs on this album for me. That's very much to the detriment. Thoughtless is a song that has a pretty anthemic chorus. It's got one of
mm,
the better hooks on the album,
yeah,
but the lyrics are a bit problematic on this song, aren't they?
yeah.
You're gonna just give us a bit of an overview of what the
So
lyrics are about.
my understanding, apparently, again, I'm always very iffy about like I don't want to be like stating things out as fact, but from a interview with John Davis, he said that this song was kind of inspired by the Columbine
Mm,
school shooting,
yeah,
and it was kind of more of a perspective of the
the
shooter,
shooter.
the shooters, rather than the victims.
The video
Um,
certainly plays into that, doesn't it?
and when you watch the video, it kind of confirms this in a way. It's played a bit playful and a bit crude, but I think what is kind of intended and
Yeah,
behind the
yeah, yeah.
scenes,
I'm
and
surprised.
From what Jesse from Breaking Bad,
Yeah.
what he's wearing and what he's doing, it's
You
very.
think if this video was made today in this day and age, it would be shut down, wouldn't it? It would be cancelled.
Oh yeah, there'll be a lot of questions asked, but at the same time, to give a bit of defence, I feel like with art, you can't not hold back
Mm,
on things.
yeah.
And again, there was a lot of animosity towards that event because like governments and conservatives all pointed the finger
Mm,
towards metal music, and Marilyn Manson got it
yeah.
in the neck,
Yeah, definitely.
Eminem got it in the neck. They were kind of blaming like modern music and saying that was the reason behind it. So I can understand that there was a lot of emotions around that at the time. But
Also, I,
yeah,
I can imagine quite a lot of KoRn's fan base at the time were sort of alienated teenager in school and stuff like that. They probably did. I'm not saying KoRn fans were school shooters by any means. I'm just saying that KoRn fans probably identified with the concept of that. I'm alone and it's me against the world
yeah,
type thing that the lyrics of this song are getting at.
I think maybe maybe this has kind of gone a bit too far, and maybe it's been taken out of hand. But I think maybe it is just trying to be the anthem of the alternative versus like
Yeah.
what would they call like the jocks and the preps and
Yeah,
that
and
like
maybe
American high school, you know.
the video is just a completely the video and the lyrics maybe not don't match up, and that's just a completely separate
No,
art form. So we won't go in too hard on that song. I didn't think it was one of the worst songs on the album by any means. I thought it was. It's just, again, the pronunciations are coming. Why are you trying to make fun of me?
I think another thing. I think it's we may as well bring it up this far. In is there's a lot. He loves to use the word the you know grape.
Yes, 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 yeah.
I think he uses it a bit too loosely
He
and a bit
does
too liberally.
throw it around.
It's in this song quite prominently. Jonathan Davis was a victim of horrific abuse
Yeah.
but I do think that word is used very sparingly in KoRn's music.
Again, it's a product of its time.
Yeah,
You wouldn't have this song in this day and age, would you?
no.
It wouldn't be allowed. It wouldn't be. It would be very frowned upon. But we'll move forward anyway because at this point in the album, I'm looking ahead to me. I'm thinking we must be like halfway through the album now. At this point, it's like a third of the way through.
Yeah,
This
it
album,
really is a slog, isn't it?
this album is too long. This it's 1 hour and 5 minutes long, and there's no reason for it to be this long. By the time I get through One More Time and Hating, which is another average ballad, I'm sort of fatigued by it because it sounds the same all the way through,
Yeah.
and it sounds very sort of like one note. It's a one trick pony type album.
I definitely
It,
remember as a kid, I would have the albums on my iPod Classic or
yeah.
my iPod Touch or whatever I had at the time. That's how I listened. That's how I consumed music as a teenager. I remember if I was going out on a bit of a walk and I knew I'd be out for like most of the day, I'd kind of be like, right, I want to listen to. Let's put the first album on, and I'll just
Mm,
listen to the whole first album
yeah,
throughout.
yeah.
Let's put issues on and listen to that. I'd go, oh, Untouchables. Let's give that a go, and
Mm.
I could never get through it
It's so
because
long.
it is so long and it is a slog. And again, like I really I'm a bit anxious about what the response to this will be.
Listen, this is
But
our opinion.
it is, yeah. At the end of the day, it is just our opinion. But this album is really like highly rated
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and really like appreciated by the fans and considered peak
Yeah,
corn. And
I don't get it,
I
honestly.
don't see it at all. I
Um,
don't see it.
I'm not against long albums. I like a lot of long albums. I like albums that are 2 hours long sometimes,
I
but they have grand concepts tying them together. This album doesn't. This
Yeah.
album is just a collection of songs, and the songs on this album fall short for me personally. I just want to touch on Alone I Break because this song is painful to listen to.
Oh no, I like
It's
Alone
you
I Break.
can't know. Listen,
I like it.
I'm gonna do what I did with Issues. I'm gonna change your mind. Right.
You know.
The MIDI strings, the little faint, wispy little strings in the verse, clashed with John Davis's caterwauling vocals, do not go together. John Davis won't sing normally on this song. If you actually listen to it and listen to how ugly soft violins and strings and everything clash with his voice. It's alarming. I can make it go away, and the
Yeah.
in the background, such a soft instrumentation. And I don't know whether he was mixed too high or whether he's not. He's just shouting all over the track, and I'm like, it sounds terrible. It's like trying to be a tender ballad, but his vocals are so loud and overbearing that it just doesn't work.
It's amazing how we've got this far. Like certain things we haven't really touched upon, but Jonathan Davis's vocals as a whole, where there's two kind of things he does, and there's the growl
Yeah,
and the growly vocals, and then there's it's like a bit nasally,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
the normal kind of singing voice. And I think sometimes when he's doing that singing voice, it can be quite nice and quite pleasant sometimes.
On the later
And
albums, it is.
so on a song like this, with it being more ballady, and I think I know this is probably one of the few songs he wrote for going in the studio on a acoustic guitar. But I think it was kind of one of them where it's like we're in a metal band and we can't
Yeah, yeah,
break the
yeah.
formula too much.
Like if you listen to the songs, if you listen to John Davis singing on the later albums, the fella can sing.
Yeah,
Right, he can hold a note and he can sing tenderly as well. He can sing in his mid range quite well. But on this album, in general, in this period of his career, he just seems unable to control his voice. And this song is one of the worst examples of that for me because it's just so. I just I can't stand this song. I really can't.
I like it. I think it's cute. I want to give it a cuddle.
I dare you to listen to it again after this podcast.
There's one song on this album. I think we'll wrap this album up because
Yeah,
it's just becoming a storm of negativity.
it's becoming as long as the album itself.
But there's one song on this album I fucking hate, and it is "Beat It Up Right."
It's terrible. It's
Oh
so
my
bad.
Christ!
And also Embrace, and Beat It Up Right, one after the other, are just dreadful tracks. One of John Davis's most annoying vocal performances ever is on Embrace with the divine, 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 divine. It's like, okay, we get it.
I'm not going to go too much into detail on
Beat
this,
It Up Right, though,
but I had once received a hand job
to
while
this song.
Embrace was being played,
Oh,
and it was not a very good experience. But one of the biggest fears I had while this event was taking place was please don't let Beat It Up Right come on while this is happening, because that would probably just be the end of my life.
But you knew it was going to come on, didn't
I
you?
would probably become celebrated
Yeah,
if
yeah,
that
yeah.
happened. That would have been tragic.
Oh dear.
Again, it's going back to like just the crude, the
Yeah.
sex, the fucking.
That was you. That.
Ready to get
Oh dear.
excited, baby.
Beat it up right does sound like a euphemism
Yeah,
for wank, doesn't
it's a ass up high, make a
it?
motherfucker
Oh god.
cry.
Oh no. It's
Yeah,
no.
someone must have, like, there's many moving parts. There's many moving parts, and even if all 5 band members thought that was fire, there should have been someone in the studio who was like, "Listen, chop
There's
that.
got to be, hasn't there? There's got to be someone,
That's not
surely.
great." But anyway, let's just sum this album up and leave it there and wait for the aftermath now.
Go on.
Wait for the fallout.
Do you want to give your summary first, the album?
Okay, so I just don't like this album. I really don't. I think I'm probably even more harsh to it because of how well received it is.
Hmm.
So I'm really my head's like I'm really trying to think here.
You've got to be honest.
I'm
Don't
going to
be
be
afraid of
honest.
backlash.
5 out of 10.
Right. Well,
So far, the lowest rated album.
okay. Well, I'm about to receive all the backlash then
Go
because
on.
I'm giving this a 3 out of 10. There is not a track on this album that I would want to revisit. It ranges from middle of the road, bang average, to outright horrific in parts. And like I said, it was the biggest disappointment so far because I remember loving this album and I wanted to re-listen to this album and go, do you know what? I was right. My 15-year-old self was right. This is a banger, but it isn't.
With Untouchables, I think we will leave that there for part 1, and we will get into part 2 with Take a Look in the Mirror, and then we'll be getting into kind of what I kind of consider KoRn's kind of middle period. So, thanks for listening to part 1.
See you in the second part.
See you in the second part.